Rain was not supposed to exist on Kepri 9. Everyone on the planet knew that. The sky was engineered to be clear, the air dry and steady, the climate balanced down to tiny decimals. Rain belonged to old Earth stories, to memories humans carried from a world they had left behind. On Kepri 9, water came only through pipes, filters, and carefully measured releases. So when the first drop hit the metal roof of the remote climate research outpost, Mara Ionescu thought it was a sensor glitch. She was seated at the main console, boots hooked under the chair rung, eyes moving across quiet screens. The outpost was far from the main colony, built on a wide plain of pale stone and dust. It existed for observation, not excitement. Most days were silent, predictable, safe. Then came the sound, a soft tap, then another. Mara frowned and looked up. The sound repeated, slow and uneven, like fingers drumming lightly above her head. She stood, listening. The outpost's metal roof carried vibrations well. This was not machinery. It was not thermal expansion. Another tap, then several more. Her wrist console chimed sharply. Emergency seal engaged. Before she could react, heavy shutters slid over the windows with a dull thud. Red lights blinked once, then shifted to yellow. A comm system voice filled the room. Unscheduled atmospheric event detected. Habitat sealing in progress. Mara stared at the ceiling. "That's impossible," she said out loud. From the adjoining lab came the sound of hurried movement. T-Relis appeared in the doorway, tall and slender, their smooth skin showing faint color shifts of concern. Their eyes were wide, unblinking. "Engineer Mara," T-Relis said. "External precipitation has been confirmed." Mara let out a short laugh, sharp with disbelief. "No. That can't be right." T-Relis stepped closer and tilted their head, a gesture of focus among their people. "It is correct. Liquid water is falling from the sky, across the entire region." As if to prove it, the tapping grew louder. The sound became a steady pattern, dozens of drops striking metal, stone, solar panels. A whispering roar followed, soft but constant. "Rain." Mara walked to the sealed window and pressed her palm against the cool surface. She couldn't see outside, but she could hear it now clearly. Water falling freely, untamed. "Climate control must have failed," she muttered. "Or the orbital mirrors glitched, or the models were wrong." "All models," T-Relis said quietly, "agree this should not happen." That was what worried Mara most. The system lights shifted again. Internal temperature rose by 2 degrees as external cooling protocols shut down. The outpost was designed to keep heat inside during rare cold snaps, not release it during humidity events that were never meant to exist. Mara exhaled slowly. "Okay, first rule, don't panic." T-Relis watched her closely. "Your species often states that rule after panic has already begun." "Fair," Mara said. "Still, we adapt." She crossed back to the console and pulled up diagnostic data. The screens filled with scrolling numbers and warnings. Atmospheric pressure outside was rising. Humidity levels were climbing fast. The rain showed no sign of stopping. Communications blinked red. "Signal interference," Mara said. "Great, just great." They were locked in. T-Relis moved to assist, long fingers dancing over a secondary panel. "I am registering elevated thermal buildup. This structure was not designed for sustained internal heat." "Yeah, I noticed," Mara said, already loosening the collar of her uniform. "We'll manage." Hours passed differently after that. Time stretched, bent by the sound of rain and the steady increase of warmth. The air grew heavy, thick with moisture that clung to skin and fabric. Systems hummed louder as they worked harder, then quieter as they shut down non-essential functions. Mara rerouted power, shut off unused sections, and improvised airflow paths the outpost designers had never imagined needing. She worked with calm hands, though her thoughts raced. Rain changed everything. T-Relis observed her with growing fascination. Humans, according to interstellar reports, were emotional, reactive, prone to stress. Yet here Mara was, humming softly to herself as she worked, fingers moving with confidence through chaos. "You appear comfortable," T-Relly said. Mara glanced up. "Comfortable? No, focused." "Big difference." They paused, then added, "Problems don't scare me. Problems are just puzzles that don't know they're solved yet." T-Rellies considered this. Among their species, deviation from expected outcomes caused chemical distress. Uncertainty was regulated away. Watching Mara function without such control was unsettling and intriguing. The heat continued to rise. They removed outer layers of clothing, laying them aside. Professional distance softened under necessity. They shared water rations, passed tools hand to hand, brushed fingers without comment. Each small moment lingered longer than expected. Outside, the rain fell without pause. It struck the land, darkening stone that had never known moisture. Sensors showed subtle changes in soil chemistry and atmospheric charge. The planet was responding. Mara noticed patterns in the data that the automated systems ignored. Tiny fluctuations, rhythms, almost like breathing. She paused, staring at the screen. "This rain," she said slowly, "it's not random." T-Rellies joined her close enough that Mara could feel their warmth. "Explain." "It's changing," Mara said, "adjusting, like it's reacting to something." "To what?" T-Rellies asked. Mara didn't answer right away. She listened to the rain, to the hum of the outpost, to the sound of two beings sharing a space too small for distance. "Us," she said finally. T-Rellies felt a subtle shift ripple through their system, a sensation without a chemical label, curiosity perhaps, or something warmer. The outpost lights dimmed as power shifted again. The room glowed soft and yellow. The rain continued, steady and patient. Locked inside by a storm that should not exist, they stood together, unaware that this was only the beginning. The rain did not slow when night should have come. On Kepri 9, night was usually calm and cool. The engineered sky dimmed on schedule, temperatures dropped gently, and systems rested. But inside the sealed outpost, time felt confused. The artificial lights stayed on low power, casting soft shadows that shifted as systems adjusted again and again. Mara sat on the floor near the main console, her back against the wall, boots discarded nearby. A tablet rested on her knees, filled with flowing data she had stopped actively reading. She was listening instead. The rain had changed its sound. Earlier, it had been sharp and uneven, like a mistake repeating itself. Now it was smoother, steady, almost calm. It tapped and slid across the roof and walls in patterns that made Mara think of breathing lungs or a slow heartbeat. Across the room, T-Rellies stood very still near the environmental controls. Their skin showed faint color waves, subtle signs of internal imbalance. The rising humidity was affecting their natural regulation. "You should sit," Mara said without looking up. "Standing won't help." T-Rellies hesitated, then lowered themselves onto a bench opposite her. "This environment is unfamiliar," they said carefully. "My species avoids such conditions." "Humans too," Mara replied. "We just pretend we're fine while we panic inside." T-Rellies studied her. "You do not appear to be panicking," Mara smiled faintly. "Give it time." The temperature ticked up another degree. The air felt thick now, heavy with warmth and moisture. Sweat clung to Mara's skin. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and took a careful sip of water. The communications panel chimed briefly, then went silent again. "No signal," Mara muttered. "Still nothing." "Rescue probability decreases with time," T-Rellies said. "True," Mara replied. "But panic won't fix that." She set the tablet aside and stood, stretching slowly. Her movements were loose, relaxed, as if her body accepted the heat before her mind did. She crossed the room and adjusted a manual vent, redirecting air flow in a way no training manual suggested. T-Rellies watched closely. "That configuration violates standard safety models." "So did building a dry planet that suddenly rains," Mara said. "Rules change." The vent clicked into place. Air shifted, not cooler but moving better. The space felt slightly more bearable. T-Relis felt it too. Their skin tone steadied a fraction. Your solutions rely heavily on intuition. Experience, Mara corrected, and a willingness to be wrong. T-Relis considered that. Among their people, being wrong carried deep chemical consequences. Errors were avoided, not explored. Watching Mara adjust, test, fail, and try again without visible distress felt strange and interesting. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain. Mara became aware of small details she would normally ignore. The way T-Relis breathed slow and measured. The way the lights reflected softly off their skin. The shared warmth of the room, no longer just uncomfortable but present, wrapping around them both. Her thoughts drifted. "This rain," she said quietly, "it's still changing." T-Relis looked up. "In what way?" Mara crossed back to the console and brought up a visual graph. "See this? The pattern shifts every few minutes, not random, it's responsive." "To environmental changes?" T-Relis asked. "Partly," Mara said, "but also to us. Power spikes when we move, when we talk, when our body heat changes." T-Relis felt another strange sensation move through them, a tightness in their chest cavity. "You are suggesting the planetary systems are reacting to human presence?" "Yes," Mara said simply, "not just humans. Living beings, emotion, movement, heat, things the original models never accounted for." "That is not possible," T-Relis said automatically. Mara smiled again, softer this time. "Neither is rain." The lights dimmed further as the outpost entered deeper power conservation. Shadows lengthened. The rain outside grew gentler as if listening. The heat continued to rise, but more slowly now. T-Relis removed another layer of clothing, their movements careful. Their species rarely exposed themselves like this. It felt vulnerable, and yet necessary. Mara noticed but said nothing. She was aware of her own skin, damp with sweat, the closeness of the space, the quiet intimacy of shared survival. It made her heart beat a little faster. She focused on the data instead. "Look," she said, pointing. "When we stop moving, the rain weakens. When we interact, it strengthens, not violently, just present." T-Relis leaned closer to see. Their shoulder brushed Mara's. Neither moved away. "I am experiencing irregular internal responses," T-Relis said softly. "Like what?" Mara asked, not looking at them. "Difficulty regulating focus," T-Relis replied. "Heightened awareness, thermal sensitivity," Mara nodded. "Sounds familiar." They shared a small, quiet laugh. It broke some invisible tension in the room. Hours passed like that. Talking, adjusting systems, sitting in shared silence. The outpost felt smaller but not oppressive. The rain became a constant companion instead of a threat. Eventually, power dropped again. The console screens went dark, leaving only emergency lighting. "Well," Mara said, "that's that." T-Relis looked concerned. "Without full data access." "We're okay," Mara interrupted gently. "Sometimes you stop measuring and start feeling." T-Relis did not fully understand, but they did not argue. They moved closer to the center of the room where airflow was best. The heat pressed in, but it was manageable. Shared. Mara closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the rain, feeling the strange calm settle over her. "This planet," she said quietly, "it's alive in ways we didn't expect." T-Relis looked at her, truly looked. At her relaxed posture, her steady breathing, her acceptance of the unknown. "Perhaps," T-Relis said slowly, "humans are as well." The rain continued to fall, steady and patient, as something between them shifted, unnoticed but undeniable. The outpost woke slowly, like a tired mind pulling itself back into thought. Emergency lights still glowed along the walls, soft and warm, painting everything in gentle colors. The rain outside had not stopped, but it had changed again. It no longer struck the roof with clear taps. Now it slid, flowed, and whispered, as if the planet itself had settled into a steady rhythm. Mara stirred first. She had not meant to sleep. She rarely did in strange situations, but exhaustion had found her anyway. She was seated on the floor near the center of the room, her back against a storage unit. Her legs were stretched out, and her head had tilted to one side. She became aware of warmth before she fully opened her eyes. T-Relis sat beside her, closer than she remembered choosing. Their shoulder touched hers lightly, not pressed, just there. Their posture was careful, almost protective, as if they had adjusted themselves without waking her. Mara opened her eyes and froze for half a second. Then she relaxed. The heat between them was not uncomfortable. It was steady, shared. "Sorry," she murmured, her voice rough from sleep. "I didn't mean to pass out." "You required rest," T-Relis said quietly. "Your biological indicators showed strain." Mara smiled faintly. "You were watching me." "Yes." She shifted slightly, sitting up straighter. The room felt different now. The air was still warm, still heavy with moisture, but it no longer pressed down on her chest. The systems hummed at a low, stable level. "Did anything change?" she asked. "Yes," T-Relis replied. "The rainfall intensity reduced during your sleep. It increased again when you awoke." Mara blinked. "You're kidding." "I am not," T-Relis said. "I monitored it closely." Mara pushed herself to her feet and crossed to the console. Some power had returned, just enough for basic displays. She pulled up environmental data and stared. The patterns were clearer now. The rain responded to movement, to sound, to body heat, to emotion, though that was harder to measure. It rose gently when Mara spoke, dipped when she paused. When T-Relis approached her, the humidity adjusted slightly, as if compensating. "This is unbelievable," Mara whispered. T-Relis stepped beside her. "It appears the terraforming systems are no longer operating under fixed parameters." "They're learning," Mara said, "adapting." "To what end?" T-Relis asked. Mara didn't answer right away. She rested her hands on the console and leaned forward, studying the slow curves of the graphs. "To balance," she said finally. "Not control, balance." T-Relis felt another unfamiliar internal shift. Their species designed environments that obeyed. Systems that followed commands without deviation. A world that adjusted itself based on emotional presence was unsettling and fascinating. The temperature rose slightly again, just enough for Mara to notice. She rolled her shoulders and sighed. "We need to manage the heat better," she said. "If this keeps up, the outpost won't fail, but we'll be miserable." "I am already operating outside safe comfort thresholds," T-Relis admitted. Mara glanced at them. "You okay?" "I am functional," T-Relis said. Then after a pause, "Though my internal regulation is no longer stable." Mara nodded slowly. "Yeah, mine too." She moved toward the environmental exchange panel, the one rarely used. It allowed limited interaction between inside and outside air, mostly for calibration tests. Opening it during an unknown storm went against every protocol. She stopped with her hand hovering over the controls. T-Relis noticed. "You are considering a dangerous option." Mara chuckled softly. "Dangerous is a strong word. Unapproved is more accurate. If the external atmosphere overwhelms the internal systems, then we adapt again," Mara finished. She looked at T-Relis, really looked at them, at the careful way they stood, at the faint color changes along their skin that suggested concern, curiosity, and something else Mara didn't have a name for. "I won't do it without your agreement," Mara said. "We're in this together." T-Relis felt something settle inside them at that, a sense of shared choice. Shared responsibility. "Proceed," they said. Mara smiled and activated the valve. There was a soft hiss as the seal adjusted. Air moved, not violently, gently. Cool moisture seeped into the outpost, carrying the scent of wet stone and something fresh, something alive. The temperature dropped by a fraction. Mara let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Oh, that's better." The rain outside softened further, as if responding to the change. The pounding reduced to a calm, steady fall. T-Relis felt their internal systems adjust. The tightness eased, their focus sharpened. This action stabilized the environment, they said, surprised. Because we stopped fighting it, Mara replied. We listened. They stood there together, watching the data shift into smooth, gentle lines. Minutes passed, then more. The heat between them remained, but it was different now. Not sharp, not tense. It felt natural, like sitting near a fire that warmed without burning. Mara leaned against the console, tired but calm. You know, she said, humans used to do this all the time back on Earth. Open themselves to uncontrolled environments, T-Relis asked. Yeah, Mara said. We lived with storms, learned their moods, didn't always win, but we survived. T-Relis turned that over in their mind. My species avoids unpredictability. I figured, Mara said gently. They shared a quiet moment, no rush, no urgency. The rain continued, softer now, almost content. T-Relis spoke again, their voice lower. Earlier, I reported irregular internal responses. Mara nodded. Still happening. Yes, T-Relis said. They have intensified. Mara's heart skipped slightly. In a bad way. No, T-Relis said after a pause. In a complex way. Mara smiled, small and warm. Welcome to being human adjacent. T-Relis surprised her by making a soft sound that might have been a laugh. The lights brightened slightly as systems stabilized further. The outpost felt less like a trap now and more like a shelter. Outside, Kepri 9 adjusted, learned, and listened. Inside, two beings shared heat, space, and a quiet understanding that neither fully explained, but neither resisted. The outpost felt different after the valve was opened. Not cooler in any dramatic way, not suddenly comfortable, but calmer. The air moved with purpose now, slow and steady, carrying the sound and scent of rain inside. The walls no longer seemed to press inward. The space breathed. Mara noticed it first in her shoulders. They had been tight for hours, maybe longer, and now they loosened without her asking them to. She rolled her neck gently and let out a quiet sigh. That helped more than I expected, she said. T-Relis stood near the exchange panel, watching the readouts with careful focus. Their skin tones had shifted into softer, more even colors. My internal regulation has stabilized further, they said. This solution contradicts all prior safety logic. Mara smiled. Good thing logic isn't the only tool we have. They moved through the outpost together, checking systems, adjusting small things by hand. The rain outside continued its gentle fall, never stopping but never growing stronger either. It felt as if the planet had reached an agreement with them. At one point, power surged just enough to bring the external cameras online. Mara froze when the first image appeared on the screen. The land outside was transformed. Stone that had once been pale and dusty now gleamed dark and smooth. Small streams traced paths across the ground, following curves no one had designed. The air shimmered faintly, alive with moisture and reflected light. It's beautiful, Mara whispered. T-Relis stood beside her, silent. Their species did not often describe environments that way. Worlds were evaluated, optimized, categorized. Beauty was not a required variable. And yet, watching rain fall freely on a world that had never known it, they felt something new settle inside them. The planet is responding, T-Relis said slowly. Not failing, not degrading. Adapting, Mara said, just like we are. Another temperature shift rolled through the outpost, subtle but noticeable. The heat rose slightly, then stopped as if the system itself had corrected. Mara laughed softly. See, it's learning our limits. T-Relis watched her laugh. Watched the way her face relaxed when she wasn't fighting the situation. Watched the way she trusted the unknown without needing to fully understand it. Among their people, trust was placed in systems, not moments. They were beginning to see why humans survived where others struggled. Time passed gently after that, not in sharp segments of stress and action, but in quiet stretches. They sat together near the center of the outpost, where airflow was best, sharing water and simple food packs. Their knees brushed occasionally. Neither moved away. The heat between them remained, steady and present, no longer something to resist. Mara leaned back against a storage crate, arms resting loosely at her sides. "You know," she said, staring at the ceiling, "if anyone back at the colony saw this, they'd say we broke half the rules." T-Rellies tilted their head. "Do you regret it?" Mara considered the question, then shook her head. "No, rules exist to protect life. If they stop doing that, they need changing." T-Rellies felt a strange warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. "Your species revises rules with remarkable ease." "We have to," Mara said. "The universe doesn't stay still." The rain softened further, almost a whisper now. The outpost systems chimed quietly, signaling improved stability. Internal pressure balanced. Power usage dropped. The structure had accepted the change. T-Rellies looked at the data, then at Mara. "By opening the environment instead of isolating from it, you reduced overall system stress." "Yep," Mara said. "Turns out fighting nature takes more energy than working with it." T-Rellies absorbed that in silence. They moved closer without discussing it, drawn by shared warmth and ease. The space between them felt smaller but not cramped. Safe. Mara noticed the faint color shifts along T-Rellies' skin, softer now, slower. "How are you feeling?" she asked. T-Rellies hesitated. Honesty came carefully for their species. "I am experiencing emotional feedback," they said. "Unfiltered." Mara raised an eyebrow. "And it is not unpleasant," T-Rellies admitted. "It is clarifying," Mara smiled. "Yeah, that's emotions for you." The rain outside changed again, becoming even lighter, almost mist-like. Sensors showed external temperature stabilizing around the outpost. The planet had adjusted its response. "It's like it's listening," Mara said quietly. "Or learning," T-Rellies added. They sat together, shoulders touching fully now. The heat between them was undeniable, but it no longer carried tension. It felt earned, natural. Mara closed her eyes just for a moment. She felt tired in a good way, the kind that came after doing something right. "I think," she said slowly, "if we'd kept everything sealed, the systems would have failed eventually. And if you had followed protocol exactly," T-Rellies said, "the environment would have remained hostile. Instead," Mara said, opening her eyes, "we met in the middle." T-Rellies looked at her, at the calm confidence in her expression, at the quiet certainty that did not demand agreement, only understanding. "My species studies humanity extensively," they said, "yet this aspect is rarely documented." "Which part?" Mara asked. "This," T-Rellies said. "The willingness to trust connection over control," Mara shrugged lightly. "Control is comforting, connection is effective." The outpost lights brightened slightly again. Communications flickered, then steadied. Mara sat up straighter. "Hey, that's new." She crossed to the panel and tapped the controls. A weak signal pushed through. Not enough for full contact, but enough to confirm that the storm interference was fading. "They'll reach us soon," Mara said. T-Rellies felt an unexpected tightening at that thought. "Does that concern you?" Mara paused. She hadn't expected the question. "No," she said honestly, "but I'll miss the quiet." "So will I," T-Rellies said. The rain outside slowed to a gentle drizzle. The planet seemed settled now, balanced. Inside the outpost, two beings sat together in shared warmth, no longer trapped but changed. Neither of them realized it yet, but what they had done here would ripple far beyond this storm. The rain ended without ceremony. There was no final crash of thunder, no sudden clearing of the sky. It simply softened, thinned, and then stopped, like a long breath slowly released. The sound that had filled the outpost for so long faded into silence. Mara noticed it only when the quiet felt too loud. She stood near the console, hands resting on the edge, listening. At first she thought something was wrong. The rain had become such a constant presence that its absence felt unnatural. "It stopped," she said. T-Rellies looked up from the communications panel. Their skin showed a slow, thoughtful shift of color. "Yes," they said, "external precipitation has ceased across this region." As if in response, the outpost systems adjusted again. The gentle hiss of the exchange valve faded as pressure equalized. Temperature settled into a comfortable range for both of them. The lights brightened to normal levels. The outpost felt awake. Mara exhaled and laughed quietly. Guess the planet decided it was done with us. Or satisfied, T-Relly said. Mara turned to look at them. You really think that? I do, T-Rellies replied. All indicators show a return to long-term stability. The environment adapted, then concluded the interaction. Mara nodded slowly, just like a conversation. The communications panel chimed again, this time stronger. A clear signal locked in. Mara moved quickly, fingers flying over the controls. Outpost K9 Climate Station reporting, she said. We're stable, repeat stable. A pause, static. Then a familiar voice broke through. Mara, we've been trying to reach you for hours. What happened out there? Mara glanced at T-Rellies. They met her eyes and gave a small, almost human nod. We'll explain when we get back, Mara said. Short version, the planet surprised us. The voice on the other end sounded relieved. Rescue team is already en route. ETA 3 hours. Copy that, Mara said. She ended the transmission and leaned back against the console. 3 hours. For the first time since the rain began, the thought of leaving felt strange. T-Rellies seemed to sense it. They stepped closer, standing beside her in the quiet outpost. Without the rain, the space felt larger, almost empty. The event is over, T-Rellies said. Yet I detect no relief response from you. Mara smiled faintly. I am relieved, just reflective. They walked together to the external camera feed. The land outside glistened under soft light. Small pools of water remained, tracing patterns across the stone. Steam rose gently where warmth met moisture. Life signs flickered on the sensors. Microorganisms awakening. Chemical reactions beginning. The planet was not returning to how it was before. It was becoming something new. This will change everything, Mara said quietly. Yes, T-Rellies agreed. Planetary classification will require revision. Adaptive world, Mara said. Not static. Not controlled, responsive. T-Rellies studied her. Your suggestion aligns with my conclusions. They stood in silence for a while, watching the world breathe. When the rescue shuttle finally arrived, it settled onto damp ground with careful precision. The hatch opened, releasing a burst of cooler air and voices filled with concern and questions. Mara and T-Rellies stepped outside together. The air smelled clean, fresh, different. Mara paused and tilted her face upward, letting the light touch her skin. I forgot what wet air feels like. T-Rellies watched her with quiet attention. Your species carries environmental memory deeply. Yeah, Mara said softly. Some things stick with you. They were escorted back to the colony shortly after. Medical checks, debriefings, reports. Questions piled up quickly. How did the systems fail? They didn't, Mara answered. What caused the rain? Adaptation. Why did you open the exchange valves? Mara met the lead researcher's eyes. Because the planet wasn't our enemy. T-Rellies supported her report with precise data, showing how stability increased when interaction replaced isolation. Their findings challenged long-held assumptions about terraforming and environmental control. The scientific community reacted with disbelief at first. Then curiosity, then excitement. Kepri 9 was officially reclassified within days. Adaptive world. Reports from other colonies followed. Minor weather shifts. Environmental responses linked to human presence. Nothing destructive, nothing violent, only change. Humanity gained a new reputation. Not as conquerors, not as controllers, but as catalysts. Mara returned to the outpost one last time before reassignment. The structure stood quiet now, systems humming in balance. The land around it was darker, richer, alive in subtle ways. T-Rellies joined her, carrying a small data unit. My report has been finalized, they said. It concludes that human emotional variability is not a liability, but a stabilizing factor in adaptive systems. Mara laughed. Never thought I'd see that in an official document. T-Rellies' skin shifted in what Mara now recognized as warmth. Nor did I. They stood together in the doorway, neither rushing to leave. What happens now? Mara asked. I have requested continued assignment alongside you, T-Relly said. If you accept. Mara turned to them surprised, then smiled, slow and genuine. I'd like that. They stepped away from the outpost together, leaving it behind as a quiet marker of something important. The rain had locked them in. But when it ended, it didn't release them back into who they were before. It changed them, and through them it changed a world.